Good evening, everybody. My name is Megan. Um, I am located here in South Florida. I grew up here in South Florida, and I moved back to town a couple of years ago to share permaculture and share regenerative design with my community. Because for my dear friends joining us in South Florida, or my friend who's in North Carolina who's from South Florida, you know that there's not necessarily the greatest understanding of these values in our community. So tonight we're just going to be diving into what permaculture is, and we're also going to discuss the sort of the philosophy behind permaculture. So what permaculture is, essentially the word is just a made up word, but how we can bring it to life as well, not just in the garden, which is primarily how I like to enact it, but also in our lives. There's many branches of permaculture: social permaculture, financial permaculture, and what this made up word began with was permanent agriculture. So it was putting those two words together to create a more permanent, but as we know, nothing is permanent, way of growing food and obtaining a yield from the land. So yeah, my name is Megan. I grew up in a very urban environment, and I did not grow up on a farm. I presently live in the urban environment as well too. So my hope is that whatever you receive tonight, you feel inspired and like you can bring these principles to life and really receive whatever it is that you're meant to receive tonight. I say this before the nature tours that I lead in our city park, and I'm going to present a lot of information to you tonight, but don't feel like you have to remember it all. Instead, just relax and enjoy. It's a Wednesday evening, you're tuning in, and just receive whatever it is you're supposed to receive. Whatever's supposed to stick with you will stick with you tonight. So yeah, I did not grow up on a farm, so if I can do this stuff, you guys can do this stuff too. And it's small, slow, and simple steps, which is one of the permaculture principles. So I got my notes in front of me because I always have so many things for each principle that I want to share. But at the beginning, I shared a link in the chat to a little PDF of the permaculture principles. So if you'd like, you can pull that up. It should be at the top of your chat. If you don't see it, let me know. But let's start with what is permaculture, and really what brought you guys here this evening as well too. So if you'd like to share in the chat what you think. Don't see it, don't see it. Okay, got it. I'm going to send it again right now. Maybe it wasn't there. Maybe everyone had to be here before too. Do you see it now? Great. All right, so you can just click on that if you'd like. You can print this out to have in your home. You can make it your desktop background, so that way you can see it and kind of have these principles in your mind. But we'll start with what is permaculture. So I kind of already said this word, but there's not really a set definition for what permaculture is. Really, permaculture is something that has been going on since humans have been in relationship with the land. To me, it's often this hand gesture. I find myself doing this hand gesture as I describe what it is that I do. It's a whole systems design philosophy that works with regenerative principles to provide us with kind of a compass to participate in the regeneration of flourishing life on our planet and come into relationship with living systems. So that's a mouthful. So essentially what I will tell to people when I say what I do is that I teach people how to grow food, but permaculture is so much more than that. And I think that you guys will go away with that understanding tonight, or at least that's my hope. So this hand gesture is the embodiment of this regenerative practice. Maybe some of you guys have heard about regenerative agriculture, which is coming to be. There's a lot more talk about the importance of regenerating our resources. the word for the longest time has been sustainability. But if I were to describe sustainability with a hand gesture, it would be kind of this flat line where things are sustaining, they're staying the same. We're just kind of hanging on, trying to do our best. But permaculture provides this ability to regenerate and to tap into this circular motion. I have next to me my Permaculture Design manual. It's a little dark here. But I love the cover of the Permaculture Design manual because it has this circle, these circular motions. And one of the founding patterns of permaculture is the mother pattern, which is the tree. But as we know, if you live in the urban environment, we often are interrupting this pattern. So for instance, the leaf that falls from the tree, right now I live beneath some oak trees. And when those leaves fall, we got that leaf blower coming through, blowing up those leaves, getting rid of it, putting that bag out on the street, get rid of it. Don't like the way it looks. I feel like I grew up to the sound of leaf blowers and lawn mowers and all of that in the urban environment. And so when we interrupt that pattern, we're missing out. We are causing ourselves, we're initiating ourselves into having to do more work. So one of the gifts of permaculture is being able to sit back and observe the patterns of nature and let nature run its course, and to feel peace and trust in that as well too, and to know how to know what's going on when we see those things happening. So essentially working with nature rather than against it is another good tagline that you'll often hear about permaculture. Yeah, there's a definition in the book that is Bill Mollison. So Bill Mollison was kind of the man back in the 70s who coined this term permaculture with his student David Holmgren. And I'll read you his definition now too and see if it sits with you. Permaculture is the conscious design and maintenance of agriculturally productive ecosystems, which have the diversity, stability, and resilience of natural ecosystems. It is the harmonious integration of landscape and people, providing their food, energy, shelter, and other material and non-material needs in a, whoa, I'm just reading this now again for the first time in a while, sustainable way. So we've come a long way since he wrote this definition back in the day. But as with all philosophy, I think it's really important to discuss it, and it's constantly evolving, as we see with me saying this even out loud right now. And I think that Bill would probably agree with us that it's important to move into this cycle of regeneration that we're moving into. So my hope tonight is that you guys feel inspired, you feel excited, and that at least one of these principles feels like something that you can bring into your life, be it in the garden or outside of the garden. So another important question to ask is why permaculture? I would love to hear in the chat why you joined here tonight and what it is that you hope to take away. But if it is gardening permaculture that you're interested in, but why you showed up here and why you're interested in permaculture is very interesting to me. I think a lot of time in the environmental movement, we're operating from this place of fear, where it's like a lot of us are waking up to what is happening on the planet and we are feeling afraid. We feel like we need to fix things, we need to solve things, and if we don't, everything's going to go awry. So these are my notes from years ago creating this class, and I noticed that a lot of them in the beginning are having to do with climate change, amending the harm caused by modern systems, finite resources, consumption as a path to happiness is no longer serving us. But now I would say that my why for why I do permaculture, why I practice permaculture, why I'm here tonight teaching this workshop on permaculture is because of the feeling that comes from participating in permaculture, from this relationship to living systems, to feeling a sense of belonging and home on the earth and really understanding how to operate in the world. So yeah, to me, most of all, it's this feeling that makes me feel like I I have a sense of purpose, and that I know I have a better understanding of what's going on, because we're so tuned to the world of human things all the time, um, that it's amazing when we start to wake up and realize how much else is going on outside of us, be it with plants or the lizards outside of my door that I love to watch, or whatever it is. It's amazing to see that going on. Oh, my list continues: food security, change the world. But my last notes on here from back in the day were sense of belonging and place. So feeling like we're at home on the earth. So good, I had that understanding. um, so yeah, let's dive in now, because I wanna end this at 7 to keep it short and tight and not have you guys be on a Zoom all night. So yeah, there's the permaculture ethics and the permaculture principles. Let me see if the document I sent. Yes, so at the center of, you got the little wheel with the different icons, but then at the center you see those 3 different points, and those are the permaculture ethics. So the ethics are kind of this foundation, kind of like our creed, I guess, as permaculture practitioners. And the first one is earth care. So oftentimes when I'm teaching this class in person, I'll then pause for a moment and say, why do you think that is? So if you'd like to share in the chat why you think earth care comes before people care, I'd love to hear that. But I'll also just keep going. So earth care comes first, in my opinion, because it's our container, it's our home. It's, if we don't have the earth, then we don't have people. I guess it's kind of obvious. Yes, the earth is needed for people care. And it also makes us realize this lack of separation between earth and people too. It's kind of this blurred line where it's our home. So yeah, earth care is the foundation. Then comes people care, which is what we're doing tonight, gathering on Zoom from all over the place to share ideas, to empower one another, and to grow stronger and be in relationship with one another. And the last one, fair share, is kind of the checks and balances that keeps everything in balance. I think it's on the picture. It's a piece of pie. Yep, it's a little slice of pie coming out of there. So it keeps things in check. And we'll talk more about that when we dive into the principles too. But it's this hand gesture again. So if you have any questions on the ethics, feel free to share in the chat. But if not, we will dive into the principles. So there's 12 of them. I know what you're thinking. Oh my God, we're going to go over 12 things, but just don't worry about it. They're going to fly by so fast. So the first one I've actually been thinking about a lot today, and they all kind of build on one another. So the first one is observe and interact. And so this morning I received news. I'm not sure if my dad is on the call tonight, but he was maybe going to join us here tonight. My dad called me this morning and he shared some hard news with me that someone that we love, 2 people that we love, have passed away. And I felt very sad this morning, and I was like, how am I going to teach a class this evening? But I went outside, because that usually for me is very good medicine. And so I went outside and I went for a bike ride and began observing and interacting with the same things that I see all the time, but with fresh eyes and with a sense of wonder. It was almost like I was seeing through this person's eyes who I admire so much. And so observing and interacting when it comes to the garden, it comes to permaculture, brings us into a state of gratitude. It helps us realize what we already have around us. We're so conditioned to, when we pick up a new trade, I want to start gardening, I want to start growing food, I got to go to the local garden store, I got to buy all this stuff. But this principle inspires us to just realize what is already around us, to ask those questions of, I got a couple on here. What's the broader picture here? How can I most effectively interact with my environment? Am I in the urban environment? Am I in a place where I have a little bit more land? Is there even a problem to be solved? And if there is, has nature solved this problem before? And how can I learn from nature in moving forward? So one of my favorite exercises when I teach this class that we won't be able to do tonight because it's dark outside. I was talking to our executive director before and she was like, "Are you going to film from your garden?" And I was like, "Nope, it's dark outside." But this is kind of your homework takeaway. So if you do want to write one thing down or remember one thing, it goes based off this first principle because it's where we begin. So I learned this in my permaculture design certification, and my teacher, she called it a sit spot. So what a sit spot can be is anything. It doesn't have to be a perfect Zen garden where everything is quiet. I don't know if you can hear the sirens going past as I have my little headphones in, but I certainly don't have perfect silence being in the urban environment. But what a sit spot is a place where you'll go and you'll sit and you'll just observe and interact with whatever's going on around you. It's nice to start from the macro level, from those overarching patterns, moving down to the details. So this can go on for 5-10 minutes, whatever time you have, but it's a really nice mindfulness practice that helps you to slow down, helps you to notice what's going on around you, and helps you to ground as well too. And if you are thinking about starting a garden, this is an excellent way to begin. Just starting to notice sunlight patterns, noticing the wind, just noticing what's going on. And then you move into the second principle, which is catch and store energy. If anyone has any questions on the sit spot exercise, you're welcome to post it in the chat. But it's essentially just sitting somewhere. Please don't bring your phone. Just sit. As long as you got 5-10 minutes is plenty, and just noticing what's going on. And just doing this for a couple of days, and you start to feel a little bit more connected to what's going on. All right. Number 2, catch and store energy. So we've started sitting in our garden. We're noticing what's going on. And we start to say, I've been talking about this oak tree that I have above my house. So right now that oak tree is dropping leaves. So I say, wow, this oak tree is dropping a lot of leaves right now. How can I catch and store this energy? So catch and store energy is we notice what we've got going on. Maybe we have some excellent sunlight coming in. Maybe it's the rainy season and we want to put in some rain barrels. Maybe it's the oak leaves, which could be a source of fertility. I haven't had mulch dropped at my house in a while. So I live next door to my aunt and my grandma. We've been using the oak leaves to cover our compost when we bring it outside. How can we use the resources that we have and really harness that energy? Let's look to see what I got in my notes. A strong system does not leak energy or leaks as little as possible. This principle should be fun and creative. It should be an exercise in feeling excited. It feels exciting when you realize how much you've got and how can I keep that stuff on site and use it to its highest purpose. I know we got Richie on the chat too. Richie's having solar installed at his house right now. So us in the sunshine state, how can we harness the energy of that sun and really use it to our advantage? If you want to share any thoughts on that, you can share in the chat, but let's keep rolling. Obtain a yield. So this one seems kind of obvious, right? So we're catching and storing energy. Of course, we're starting a garden. We want to be pulling up big carrots from the garden, or for me, papayas, whatever it is, wherever you are. But one of the quotes I love from this one, from Bill Mollison, is he says that yields are only limited by the imagination of the designer. So a lot of times when we go into a project, let's use the example of gardening. We're starting a garden. The yield I want to obtain is bringing food from the garden. But we start to notice when we plant a garden that many more yields come to be. Maybe it's the neighbors walking past and you're creating some new relationships with them. Maybe it's the lessons you're starting to learn from the garden as well too. Um, just to share a brief story about who I am today, why I'm sharing a permaculture Zoom right now, really all started with a milkweed plant many years ago. I thought I was just buying a milkweed plant. I don't even really know why I wanted to buy a milkweed plant, but I did. And man, it taught me so many lessons observing the caterpillars. I would anytime my friends would come over, I'd bring them outside. I wanted to show them the caterpillars. I was so excited about the caterpillars. Nobody else really cared that much. A hurricane moved through. I brought the caterpillars inside, created them a whole habitat, brought them outside after the hurricane, saw a bunch of caterpillars on the milkweed plant. Pretty much just looking at me was my perception of it while I was putting the other caterpillars out. So relinquishing control. There's so many lessons we learn from actually participating in this process of being in the garden. So if you'd like, I would love if you guys shared in the chat, if you are a grower and you are gardening, maybe a lesson or a yield you didn't expect to obtain from growing a garden. Yeah. Looking for the potential of all life systems is this one. Kind of expanding out from what we think is just the one thing that we're getting out of the project that we're taking on. Another exercise too I like to do with people when we're doing this class too, which could be a good homework exercise if you're starting a garden, is to jot down a couple ways that you could more creatively obtain a yield from your space. So maybe you already do have a garden going, but what is a way that you could obtain another yield from it? Maybe bring in some rainwater catchment to water your plants, or creating a little sit spot where you sit and learn from nature. You just put some potatoes to grow in a couple months back. Yes, so that there is no failure ever in the garden. You know, when I tell people what I do, so many, I'm sure when you tell people that you like to grow food, they're like, oh, I don't have a green thumb, not for me. But the truth is, there is no such thing as a green thumb, and there's no way that we can fail when we start growing either. It is all just a process of learning and coming closer to what it means to be alive on our planet and how to participate in that give and take of life. So yeah, it's amazing. The garden is such an amazing mirror for things that we have inside of us and things that we feel that we may be lacking. I'm not good enough to grow a garden or whatever it is, or I failed at this one thing, but it's always just a lesson and it's always an opportunity to grow. Thank you for sharing that, Ijo. All right, number 4, apply self-regulation and feedback. So this one is kind of the one where I think of this hand gesture, we're pulling in the reins a little bit. It seems like it wouldn't be that fun to apply self-regulation and feedback, but it's important to do so. What comes to mind when I think of this principle is the plant leaning towards the sun, trying to get that little bit of sunlight. It's applying that feedback to try and get towards the light. This is that fair share ethic again as well too, where we're keeping the system in check. Natural systems are always accepting feedback. So I like to share a story from Yellowstone on this one. If you've heard of the wolves of Yellowstone, it's a really good lesson for applying and regulating feedback. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't, but essentially what happened was wolves around people in Yellowstone doesn't sound like such a good idea. So they started removing wolves from Yellowstone, and this feedback loop started to come into play. Wolves were removed, and so the prey of the wolves, the elks, started to die back, or started to actually increase their numbers. That would make sense if they died back. So more elks means more grazing of the willow and alder along the, yes, domino effect. They started grazing along the streams, and they started eating off the the plants, because there's more of them. Nobody's here to keep it in check. For my friends in South Florida, we're looking at you, iguanas. So grazing, this lets more light into the stream. So that's just temperatures rise in the stream, erosion, fish and insect bacteria die off, the river feeders lose their source and they die back. What have we done? We took the wolves away, and all of these things happen in its place. And it's because we aren't really aware of these patterns that are playing themselves out and how we as humans can affect those in very substantial ways. So what happened was the wolves started being reintroduced and everything started falling back into place. So hopefully this story brings you a little bit of peace, because um, sometimes it feels like what we've done feels a little bit irreversible. There was a meme going around when the virus first started about we are the virus. It was saying about humans. It was kind of poking fun. And a lot of times I think people say and feel in their hearts that we're causing harm and there's no real way around it. It's kind of this feeling of disavow. But the truth is that we can definitely participate in living systems. That we don't need less of us. There's not an overpopulation problem. We just need to regulate how we are interacting with things that apply self-regulation and feedback. We're on that principle right now. So yeah, one teacher who I love, who really inspires me around this, if you feel like you want to do a little learning after this, is to look up Jeff Lawton. I'll type it in the chat. But he has some amazing videos, just so positive about how humans can be one of the most symbiotic species on the planet and how we can be in relationship with our with all of life on Earth, and we can really do it. He has some amazing projects. One's called Greening the Desert, where he goes to the desert and greens it. He's in Death Valley using these permaculture principles to bring life to places that were not necessarily hospitable to life before. Let's see if there's anything else in here. So how do we create a feedback loop? By starting small and also by observing and interacting. It always comes back to that first principle. That's really the foundation. So when we go out, I have another note in here that was about a fiddle leaf fig that I had years ago as a houseplant. It's actually still alive. It's right outside on my porch right now. But long story short, fiddle leaf fig is a very chic house plant. I brought it into my house, but it did not want to be in my house. It's a tropical plant. It wants to be outside. It wants to be in the humidity. So I started getting these little spots on it, started wilting a little bit. And that was it providing me with feedback that it wanted to be brought outside. I just Can someone give me a thumbs up if they can still hear me? Thumbs up. All right, I got them. Okay, so yeah, sorry, my headphones were dying. I charged them, don't know. Okay, so yeah, just keeping that feedback loop going, noticing what's going on, and then sometimes it's difficult to bring the fiddle leaf fig outside, but oftentimes it's what we need to do, and that's nature signaling us to what we can do next. Moving to number 5, use renewable resources and services. So I remember when I was teaching this class back in the day, I'd bring in a couple of show and tell items for things that I like to use. And sometimes it can even be just saving jars as well too. Like it doesn't have to be buying new tote bags for the grocery store or whatever it is. A lot of times it's just harnessing the energy that we already have and using those resources to be a little bit more mindful with our consumption. Another good thing to look at for this principle as well too
is once again looking to the resources that we already have and how can we renew those resources. So I would love to hear in the chat if you are already composting. The reason we chose permaculture for our first class was because we sent out a poll um, to see what you guys were interested in learning about, and permaculture was the top choice, so I love to see it. But the one after that was actually composting and soil building. So our next workshop on the 10th of February is going to be on soil building, and it's amazing to me um, how oftentimes when we start gardening, we go to the garden store and we buy soil. But looking to the systems of nature to create soil by using the waste stream that we already have around us um, can not only be more affordable and accessible for people, but also just a lot more rewarding as well too. So yeah, composting is an excellent practice. We have a whole series online on Heal the Planet's website to get you started on composting. But the talk next month will be on composting, and you can bring in some questions, and we'll share a couple ways that we can start building soil using the waste stream, doing it for free, which is great, and keeping things out of the landfill as well here too. Here in my urban environment, trees are constantly being cut down. So my preferred form of biomass, which is essentially just dead stuff or chopped up stuff, is mulch. So I have the tree trimmers. Um, will this talk be online after tonight? Others may want to see and hear it. We're recording it. It's going to a cloud. We're not exactly sure which cloud it's going to. This is my first time doing the Zoom. But we will see. Hopefully, it will be going somewhere. But if not, um, thank you for being here tonight. um, but yeah, so the next class will be on composting, and we'll go into questions around that. And my favorite biomass is mulch. I would love to hear whatever you guys use. I know that a lot of times people use um, straw, hay. Would love to hear what it is that you've got going on wherever you are. So number 6, produce no waste. So this kind of goes hand in hand with the previous one, but I think the biggest takeaway for this one is that there is no away when we throw things away. Uh, for much of my life, I didn't really think about where away was when I would throw things in the trash. And sometimes I feel like I'm too aware of where away is, and it really can be disheartening and heavy. Um, so don't beat yourself up around it. We're in between stories right now, between um, the story we want to move towards and the story that we've been in, and so just do the best that you can. But try and take those steps and be mindful when it comes to single-use items and little ways that you can start to reduce your waste. Like one of my challenges a couple years ago was like just looking to my things I do in the bathroom. So like Q-tips and dental floss and things like that. All of those options are compostable. My new item, which I didn't even think of before, was I use a electronic toothbrush, and those little toothbrush heads, they hurt to throw away. And I found some bamboo ones online, and they don't fit as well, but it's a new product, and I'm very excited about it because people are starting to think of these things, and new things are starting to be created to help us become better consumers. So just looking tonight, maybe while you, yeah, bamboo toothbrush, that's great. I saw a thing online where someone flipped the toothbrush upside down and used it as a little sign in their garden. Or you can use in your nursery as like something to mark for a seed that you've started or something like that. But just getting creative with what we've got and producing as little waste as possible. I would rephrase this one too, because it's really hard to produce no waste. As we know, nature doesn't waste. Um, so just looking towards that model and trying our best to uh, be a little bit more regenerative. One word I really like. I worked on this site on the Big Island, which is where I learned so much of what I learned of what I'm sharing with you tonight. And they called their waste stream their outflow. So just looking to what it is that's going out, and in the cafeteria where we would have guests, They had different bins. One was even pig slop because there were pigs that lived there. So like things that would go to the pigs, things that would go to the worms. And then the last one at the very end, it said landfill. So instead of trash or throwing things away, it's going to the landfill. It's going to a place, not, it's away from our home, but it's still part of this collective place that we share. All right, taking a breath. I know I'm sharing a lot, but any questions, any comments? It's very strange to just be in my house quietly sharing all this. I really miss teaching classes in person, but I'm grateful for you guys being here, and I hope you're using the chat. We'll open to questions at the end as well too. All right, moving forward, design from pattern to detail. So one of the last classes I would like to do for our permaculture series is one on patterns. It seems when I teach classes on patterns, that's oftentimes the one. I have some friends who've been in the classes that I've taught in person, and it seems like that's one of the ones that people get really excited about. This would be a pattern. Spirals are a pattern. But when you start to notice these recurring patterns in nature, you start to become empowered as a designer. This also goes back to our sit spot exercise of going from macro to micro. So pattern, say we're designing a garden, pattern is our overarching pattern. So that could be sunlight and wind patterns. Also large trees that we're installing as well too, already existing large trees. And then we're moving down to the details, which is like, I'm gonna put my Tulsi here. I'm gonna put these different small plants in the understory. So when we're designing our landscape, we can use this principle. I have a question. Gideon wants to know if there are any stores or websites. I'm going to answer questions at the end so I don't keep trailing off. So add your question at the end. Thank you for the question though. I love to see it. Okay, so pattern to details, essentially just from overarching down to small patterns. And essentially what this is the founding principle of design. Good design never really ceases. It's constantly in this state of evolution and evolving, and being gentle with that process too, because it can be scary to take that risk and to plant something. I find a lot of times people, especially in our culture where people don't really want to root down into one place, there's a large culture online of wanderlust and travel and all those sorts of things. And planting something is a commitment to a place. And when we start to realize we do want to plant, then we look up these permaculture things online and we're like, man, there's so much to learn. So just using this principle of pattern to detail, this tree is going to get roughly this big, not really even sure, don't worry too much about it. Just get those trees in the ground and try and go from the macro down to the micro level when you do so. Good design, this is a good note in here. Good design is conceived, then tested on a small scale. So the way that you could do this would be through a guild. If you've heard this word before, what a guild is like essentially a tiny food forest. So a guild would be a fruit tree surrounded by support species. Doesn't even necessarily have to be a support species, but an ideal guild would be a fruit tree, a productive tree, and then some sort of support species. So a living plant food. For me here in my place, a nitrogen fixing plant like pigeon pea, cassia, maybe a nitrogen fixing ground cover, maybe an edible ground cover like sweet potatoes, maybe a pollinating plant to attract something to pollinate our fruit tree. I remember when I was looking at some guilds before in the past, there was like a human attractor too. So like maybe a little berry plant next to it too, to bring someone a little bit closer to the guild. There's all sorts of ways that you can create things on a small scale and observe what happens there. And this is really how we get a food forest started, is through these little guilds that kind of start to blend together into a whole system. Always using that feedback loop. All right, number 8, integrate rather than segregate. So this is a big one right now. It's constantly been a big one as humans. We're constantly trying to keep things at bay. As I said, I grew up to the sound of leaf blowers, weed whackers, people shaving their ficus topiary hedge into a certain shape. Um, we're constantly trying to keep things, nature at bay, out of the urban environment. And then it's very strange too, because we idealize nature as well too. So we hyper control our environment, and then we go to these national parks to be in nature. But my hope is to show you guys that you can create little spaces, little pockets to invite nature in, and it's really important that we do this as well too. Not just for nature, but for ourselves too. Doing so is healing on so many levels, to just have a little place to observe life. Um, but yeah, this is the American lawn mentality of one thing is right, one thing is not right. But it takes more energy to keep things separate. And the truth is that if we start to shift from that idea of this thing is wrong, I want to keep it out of the system, and shift to that, how is this thing useful? One of the notes I have on here I see is like ladybugs as pest predators. So like bringing in those ladybugs as a tool, or attracting something to bring the ladybugs into the system, or dragonflies eating the mosquitoes, or pitcher plants catching the mosquitoes, or bats eating the mosquitoes, or whatever it is, bringing in something useful rather than eliminating something. Yeah, if you have any ideas of how you could, it says my internet connection's unstable. Am I still good? If you have any ideas as to maybe a problem you're having on your site, as to how you could maybe creatively respond to that. For my friends in South Florida, I mentioned the iguanas are a real challenge, but also I've heard some amazing ways that people have harnessed the energy of that. I won't go into detail because I know we have people from all over the place, but like maybe you have deer at your place, or whatever it is, something that seems like a challenge but could actually be a gift and a teacher. Oftentimes, I believe that things will arise in the garden to teach us lessons and to help us heal parts of ourselves that um, need healing and need a little bit of love. So it's never really an attack on the garden, just like whenever something comes into our consciousness, it's never really an attack. It's just an opportunity to grow and to evolve. Um, Reminding myself of that. Okay, we got 10 minutes left. 9, use small, slow, and then in parentheses, I have and simple. I don't know if this one says and simple, the graph I gave you. Yeah, so the traditional one says use small and slow solutions, but my boss on the Big Island, he also added and simple, and I love that. I think it's really important. Simple for me is often a guidepost for truth. So, small, slow, and simple solutions. Why small? Small uses less energy, and less energy in the state of resources, but also less energy in and of ourselves. A lot of times when we start a project, speaking about gardening, we're like, I want to change this all. I want to get rid of it all. I want to do it all. But then it can be a lot of energy to maintain. The hope is that you get to the food forest place where the system is mainly self-regulating, other than just you observing, interacting, and kind of participating in the process. But it's oftentimes a lot of energy to get a system started. So starting small. It provides an opportunity for gradual expansion. Slow helps us to sustain our energy and also helps us to relinquish control. Um, a friend of mine was working on a job site and he sent me a photo this last week of how they had oak trees installed. And he was like, check out the oak trees. And it was like these very mature oak trees that had just been installed. I remember one day I woke up on my street and there was a new full size oak tree that was installed. So, um, a lot of times in our modern day, we want things right away, but it's so rewarding to watch things grow, to savor that slowness and to um, watch as things evolve as well too. Um, and then simple, easier to maintain, and also this goes to that idea of the right plant for the right place as well too. Um, Say you grew up somewhere else and you moved down to South Florida and you have the idea of the Victory Garden where you're pulling up the carrots and the tomatoes and all of those classic grocery store foods. But the truth is, it can be incredibly challenging and take a lot of energy to do those things. We can definitely do it, but it will take time to build up the soil to do so. We don't have the same topsoil in the tropics. And so, simple would be planting things that want to grow in our place. And there are an amazing variety of plants that want to grow down here and that want to be known and valued and loved by all of us. There's such a variety of tropical spinaches and um, just looking outside in my yard, my big moringa tree, and a lot of plants that are really valued in the world of superfoods, but we don't even really know that we can grow in our spaces. So, um, expanding out a little bit more and being simple with it too. Just doing a couple plants at a time. A lot of times people will say, how do you know what you know? Where do I begin? And the truth is just one plant at a time, one plant a week, one plant a month, or whatever feels right. Just learning from that one plant is how you can move forward. Nature doesn't rush. You aren't running out of time, are the notes I have for that one. And it's the truth. We constantly feel like we're running out of time. Another good garden is a mirror, too, is people will say, oh, I'm missing the growing season. It's this time. I got to get this stuff in the ground. And it's definitely much more lenient here in the tropics than it is in more temperate climates. But the truth is you're always right on time when you arrive in the garden and when you arrive in this place of wanting to receive living systems and wanting to learn from nature. So there's no rush whatsoever. Just remind yourself of that and just enjoy the process. Um, Number 10, use and value diversity. Nature embodies this principle completely. We are definitely stronger when we um, open ourselves up to things. I was giving a nature tour this last weekend and we were talking about citrus. Long story short, citrus was monocropped here in the Sunshine State. Monocrop, so we grew a lot of citrus in one place. A super bug was developed, citrus greening, and it left us in a place where we aren't necessarily able to grow citrus like we used to. Um, so if we value diversity like we do in the food forest system, we're less likely to experience things like that. Nature keeps things in check. Nature balances things. Pest predators move in and correct problems. It's amazing. I posted a video on my Instagram the other day where I came home, a papaya tree had fallen down in my driveway, and I wouldn't have noticed otherwise, but there was a little cotton candy looking thing on the leaf, and it was the cocoons, little eggs of a predatory wasp that feeds on the papaya caterpillar, so it was keeping things in check. And I was like, thank you so much. It's so amazing. And on that nature tour before that I had gotten home from, there was a woman who was talking to me about how she was so worried about it and she was just about to hire a pest crew. Um, so a lot of times it's just building a healthier system that is able to support itself. And it can be challenging in the urban environment. Sometimes you feel like you're on an island. surrounded by people spraying their lawns, doing this hard work, but just holding that space and doing the best you can in the environment that you have and providing a hospitable environment for living systems to thrive is a really rewarding thing that I would like to acknowledge to you in this moment. If you are doing that, thank you so much. So yeah, use and value diversity, and this creates system security. This makes us stronger as growers and helps us to have to do less and worry about less, and makes us stronger as people too. Constantly looking to other people to learn new things, keeping an open mind, and always keeping that beginner's mind, always wanting to learn and grow. 11, use edges and value the marginal. So this goes back to that topiary once again, where we're creating that sharp edge. But a lot of times we see the edge as a problem. We're like, man, those weeds keep coming in on the edge. What's going on with that edge? It's so hard to maintain. It's so hard to keep things at bay. And so what if we shifted our perspective? What if we said, wow, that's a really energy-rich place. That edge has really got it going on. There's a lot of life force energy going on in that edge. An example of this in nature would be the shoreline. So these two forces are meeting. It's called an ecotone, where the shore and the water meet. And think about those seagulls that are flying in and pooping and eating things, and the crabs that are coming up onto the shore and going back into the sea, and that shoreline that's bringing in the seaweed. There's so many things that we can gain from the edge if we harness that energy and we really use it to our advantage. An example of this was when I worked on the Big Island, we had an edge of bananas. So to keep the jungle at bay outside of our more controlled area, we had a large row of bananas where we would chop and drop things back, which would suppress weeds and also feed the bananas. And it looked great too. So our job as designers is, how can we use this edge? How can we harness this energy? Maybe it's just a wild place where you go and harvest from, because a lot of times weeds can be real allies as well too, which I would love to go into detail about, but I see we're running out of time. If you want to learn more about weeds, I'm going to write a website, eattheweeds.com. That is the best. Green Dean is the coolest. A lot of times we think that weeds are something that we got to get rid of, but a lot of times weeds, I believe, will present themselves to us because they're medicine that we need. I mentioned I live next door to my aunt who has asthma, and there's a weed that's called the asthma plant, is its nickname, and it only grows right outside of her front door of our whole property that we share next to one another. It's really just where she is in that area. No asthma weed in my food forest at all. So very mysterious, the intelligence of plants. So how can we tap into that, and how can we receive that medicine? Let's see if there's anything else on here. We got just a minute left. Number 12, creatively use and respond to change. So I mentioned my boss already a couple times tonight. I oftentimes think of him, Scott LeBlanc, and he was a surfer dude, and he'd say, this principle is all about riding the wave. And it's the truth. Change is scary. It's hard to react and respond to change in a way that makes us feel safe and like we're doing a good job. But the truth is that change holds a lot of energy. And if we can creatively respond and ride that wave in, man, it's such a rush. Man, it feels so good. And man, can we really feel like we are connected to what's going on our planet. So life is changing at every moment. And just allowing that change to unfold and learning from it is such a gift. And so my hope is that you feel a little bit changed tonight from our conversation. I know I've shared a lot with you tonight, and I know that in some ways these principles feel new, But the truth is that this knowledge was already inside of you. I just feel lucky enough to be the teacher to remind you of it and to connect you with these principles to start to creatively use and respond to the change that is so needed on our planet and in our hearts and in our minds as well too. So yeah, thank you guys for being here tonight. I would love, if you have any questions, you're welcome to share in the chat. While you're typing in your questions, I want to thank you guys. However you found yourself here tonight, through a Facebook ad, I saw one of them, or Heal the Planet's Instagram. I'm so grateful that you were here. I'm going to type into the chat my Instagram name. When the pandemic began, I started this Instagram page to kind of share a little bit more, and it's a place where I will often just try and share educational resources with you guys, and it's the site I'm most active on right now. I'm working to create a website at this time where I'll be offering some online courses like this in permaculture, in sustainable soil building, and I'm realizing more and more that it's really important for me to share why I do this stuff too. To me, most of all, it's this feeling of relationship. I think one of the things at the heart of why we are in the situation that we're in right now is because we feel separate from each other, and we feel separate from the earth, and we feel separate from everything. And when we feel this separation, it doesn't feel good. And so when we start to come back into relationship, everything falls back into place. And so I'm going to share more about that in this new year, about how I have learned to do this, and I'm still learning to do this, and hopefully these tools will be useful to you all. So does anybody have any questions? I know we had one earlier from Mr. Gideon. Gideon wants to know if there are any stores or websites you can recommend to find products to replace our current plastic single-use items. Yes, a good one is what is it called? Her name is Trash is for Tossers, I believe it is. I can't remember what it was called, but she's a really wonderful. She had a great TED talk a couple years ago where her waste was just in a jar. Her waste for 3 years was like in one jar, and she created plastic package free shop, packagefreeshop.com. That's for Gideon. Anybody else? Any other questions while we are here? Also, my executive director wanted me to tell everybody that we are a nonprofit. This is Heal the Planet. We would love for you guys to follow on Instagram. If you're local, come to some of our events. And we're just trying to be a useful resource to you guys to participate in that regeneration of flourishing life on our planet, and feel at home on the planet too, and to know what to do. So we're constantly just trying to, when we will be doing the next class. The next class will be on 210 composting and soil building. Link with the listed principles, tab for notes. So yes, the next one will be on February 10th. Thank you guys for coming. You guys are the best. I'm gonna take a minute and read through your comments. So you're welcome to sign off. You're welcome to share in the chat. I'll be here for a couple more minutes, but I hope to see you on the 10th. I hope that we can be friends on Instagram as well too, and that what I share on there is useful to you all. And that when I launch the website, that the resources will also be useful for you as well there. Love to all.
Hey, where do you have the link for the original thing that you were talking about in the beginning that you said we could print off and add to our notes?
Oh, you got it.
Because that I didn't see. You said it was in the beginning of the chat, but it wasn't there. At least not on my end. That's the link I meant.
Yeah, I sent it again. Let me send it one more time. For some reason, it is not sending. We'll look it up. So if you Google permaculture principles, there's some great graphics that kind of tell this story. All right, just sent it again. If anybody else didn't get it, let me know.
Thank you. Thank you for the class. It was really great. I hope you have a great night.
Thank you, you too. Love to all.